So this is a panel conversation about building personal brands in the digital age, and the moderator is Dana Stanley, our Dana Stanley Green's book. Dana Stanley, who has over 20 years of experience in marketing, sales, in the market research space, in positions with increasing responsibility at companies like Greenfield, Online, Edge Research, Survey Analytics, and Research Now. So with this, please welcome Dana.
Thanks, Peter. So, as Peter mentioned, I'm the director of marketing for Greenbook, and as the marketing guy, I'm particularly interested in this question. So, we have four illustrious panelists who are, I think, still getting mic'd up, so they can make their way down when they're ready. But I think we as researchers focus so much on the day-to-day running of our business that we don't always think about our personal brands. When we think about brands, we tend to think about our company's brands. But I think all the people here, as you'll see, it'll be quite clear that your personal brand really can affect your career and it can affect your company. So we're still waiting on Tom, but I think we will, I'll go ahead and start introducing the others while he gets his microphone on. So to my immediate left is Dave McCoggan. He was with McCann advertising agency for many years. He's based in Hong Kong, and he spent his career in Asia. And his company is called, it's got an interesting name, Bibliosexual. And so welcome, Dave. Next is Tom Ewing. And Tom is he is with Brain Juicer. And he, interestingly, has a personal brand that extends beyond market research. He actually also is a music writer. And after that is Tom Anderson with Anderson Analytics. He's a text analytics expert, and his company is Odin Text. And at the end is Annie Pettit, lover of desserts, who is with Peanut Labs, which is part of Research Now. So thanks everyone for being part of the panel. So I just want to start by asking a general question, which is why build a personal brand? So anyone can jump in.
I never intended to build a personal brand. It just kind of happened. Has worked out well for me, I think. Luck.
It's with me as well. We were just trying to get data for text analytics, text mining, and so that's why I started blogging and tweeting and so forth. Had no idea that it would become a brand, but yeah, it worked out quite well.
I think one of the things about, I don't know about Dave actually, but the other three of us probably quite early on Twitter, at least in terms of market researchers. So it wasn't really in terms of kind of, oh yeah, let's use Twitter as a personal brand. We happen to be on Twitter, we happen to be market researchers. It becomes natural to tweet about market research, unless you're going to kind of scrupulously avoid the nature, which some people do.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I suspect that using mediums, whether it's Twitter or whatever, to help promote your brand is different from how you end up becoming a brand. I guess if I became a personal brand, it's because many years ago in 1996, when the Asian economy crashed, I wrote a very detailed piece of research on the way in which Asians were responding to that crash. I got asked to be interviewed by the editor of Asia Week, which at the time was a very, very good, reputable magazine on the economy in Asia. A 3-page article appeared, but the only thing people remembered was the intro paragraph where the guy said, typical of advertising people, the guy wore a Hindu jacket and wore a goatee beard. That's all people remembered about it, and it was Dave McCoggan. I think sometimes brands come about because of accident, not because you plan them.
And is that true? That begs the question: is that true of your personal brand vis-a-vis your company's brand? How do those things interact with each other? How have they for you?
Well, the first thing is that ever since that article in 1996, I have to wear these Hindu jackets ever since. And that became a talking point in the company that I used to work for. So I spent 28 years with McCann in Asia and Australia. And there was a rub. I mean, inevitably, after a number of years, because I tended to be the person that the press turned to for commentary on just about anything that was happening in Asia, and more importantly, because clients tended to come to me for that, the rub was, were they coming to me or were they coming to McCann? And I think there's always that balance between personal reputations and personal brands about, well, how much it is you and how much it is the company you work for, how important to get the balance so that you're actually feeding into each other.
Tom Ewing, your brand was quite robust, certainly in social media prior to your being with Brain Juicer, which itself has a strong brand. So how has that gone?
Brain Juicer has a pretty strong brand for a research firm. I think probably it's stronger. Like, you know, my personal brand was strong at the time because I was with a company that was an excellent company, but like quite a boring company. It was an operational company, so its job was to be boring and kind of unobtrusive. And suddenly, I wanted a kind of outlet for stuff that I was thinking and writing. So I was blogging and I was tweeting, and that kind of naturally snowballs up a personal brand. And then Brain Juicer, probably on the strength of that, actually, were interested in hiring me, and so I've come and I've done work for them. But like a lot of you know, if I think of something interesting now, then sometimes there's this question: does it go on the personal blog? Does it go on the Brain Juicer blog? And sometimes the stuff that goes on the personal blog then becomes kind of party line for the company because it's a company where lots of ideas swim around all the time anyway. So yeah, they sort of mingle and overlap. There's never been a sense of, oh, you can't say this stuff because you're working for us. And you know, if it was that kind of company, I wouldn't have joined them.
And Ian, Tom, how has your personal brand and company brand interacted?
In my case, I think they're quite different. I'll call it the Love Stats brand, not the Annie brand. That came about before I joined Research Now, and it was all about stats and dessert. And that has continued on. So I know if I want to tweet or write about desserts, that's going to go on the Love Stats section, and to some point, anything that is research and statistics will go on the Research Now, Peanut Labs side of things. But then there's also the middle point where if my point of view just gets so extreme and potentially overly opinionated, then I might just put that over onto my personal side of things as opposed to the work side of things. Every post that's research, I do think about that. Is this something that I want associated with my personal brand or with the company brand? So it's a decision every time, because I know what I say personally affects the company as well.
So we did an experiment, and this was Annie's idea, in getting ready for this session, we decided to throw a one-page survey, really an open-ended qualitative feedback request. We asked people, say at least 3 words what you think about when you hear the following brands, and we had the 4 names of the 4 people up here. And before I show the results, I just want to ask each of you, and thinking back to before you saw the results of what we collected, you know, how would you summarize for maybe some people who aren't familiar with your brand? What are some of the things that you personally associate with your brand, and then we'll look at how it came out. So Annie, you started with dessert. That's certainly. If you follow Annie on Twitter, she's has strong opinions about things like cookies and chocolate.
Very much looking forward to that. But I talk about it so much that people actually bring me dessert at conferences now, which is really convenient. So I guess I figured going in there'd be some people saying that I'm about quirky, that I'm about something research related, and other than that, I really couldn't guess, because everyone pulls out their own unique take on what you think you're presenting.
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what we would find. I mean, I know text analytics is something I speak a lot about, next-gen market research. I know those would be in there. But also I know I speak frankly on various things, so I know
think of kind of researchers as the audience. It's sort of like, what would it's going to sound very bad, what would a normal human being who isn't kind of in this, who isn't in the industry, who isn't in the kind of marketing politics, think of all that? So I suspect I probably seem quite kind of frivolous and cynical and not taking marketing terribly seriously.
Well, I think, speaking for myself, I think you're one of the only prominent market researchers out there who doesn't use your own face as an avatar. You've got the sock monster.
Yes.
Which
My
is
Twitter
why-
avatar is this. There he is. He's real in the flesh. It is my hand. You've wisely used my phone. Well, unwisely. But yeah, this is in fact my personal brand.
Dave is the one I know least before this session, and I heard them talking something about toilets and underwear.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I guess on this side of the world where I'm less known, I'm probably known for underpants because of particular speeches I give. And I do talk a lot at speeches in different conferences about men's underwear and about toilets and their social significance. So that tends to bias people's sometimes the way they think about what I do. The other, of course, thing that came up a lot was that I guess was because the word bibliosexual, which is very new, and to be honest, if you're looking for it, the company, or at least my company or my name of a company, bibliosexual is just being launched. So most of you would go, what the F is that? And that, I guess, comes through, you know.
Okay.
It does sort of bias the sample, if you like.
I guess so. So we're ready for the graphic of the results when you gentlemen in the back are ready. Okay, so Tom, I'm going to have you explain this. This is courtesy of Tom's company, OdinText. This is a map. I'll let you explain.
I seem to be near smart, which is great, and I seem to be near beard, which is factual. And other than that, I can't. Analytics, I guess. Well, actually, analytics is all kind of cluster delivered by the other Tom. So maybe that's just a sort of.
Well, I think it's
Yeah.
text analytics. This is a software output from OdinText. So we only had, I think, 150 comments about each of us. Andy launched this survey, was it late Friday?
night.
And so, usually this software is not meant to analyze 150 comments in the thousands, but basically what we have here is the size of the circle is the number of comments about the more frequently mentioned things in this survey, and the thickness of the lines is co-occurrent or overlap between concepts or nodes. And then the position, this is multi-dimensional scaling, so you can kind of see how similar or different we are. And obviously this is very small data, but what occurred to me was none of our brands are really mentioned. OdinText, Anderson Analytics, Brain Juice, or Norpeanut Labs. So people are mentioning us by names, and they have other things that they associate with us more strongly. Text analytics certainly came up with, for me, and that's why analytics came up more for me. It's not that Tom or Andy speak less about analytics, but just again, the quickest way to summarize this, the data very quickly.
So overall, how would you say the results came out relative to your prior expectations?
Yes, we all got to see the raw data, so I think, I get pleasantly surprised. The sentiment is in there as well. So, it's not quite bright red. Bright red would be bad. But there were a few comments there about, opinionated and so forth, I think for all of us. Although,
let's face it, you don't sit on a panel talking about self-branding unless you've got a big head for a start, right? We wouldn't have said yes.
yeah, I suppose so. But the majority of comments were very nice, I thought, in terms of that people appreciate some of the things we're willing to share, I guess.
One of the things that strikes me is that it's very like the sort of to kind of turn away from just us and being researchers. We now have a generation that, like on social media, is incredibly aware of branding and personal branding. And Annie's exercise reminded me of the kind of things you get on Tumblr, where people will kind of turn on anonymous asks, and they'll say, you know, teenagers or 20-somethings will say, okay, you know, tell me something that's you know, reminds me of, or a song that reminds me of me, or kind of just what do you think of me, and then. So there's this constant kind of dance of like exposing yourself to the world, not exposing yourself to the world, which is a real reality in the lives of people. And actually, it's the kind of thing that I tend not to do. So doing it as part of this exercise and getting that, you know, the sprinkling of shit among the sugar, so to speak, kind of brings it home to you. You know, this is the reality for an entire generation, that they're kind of constantly dealing with this kind of stuff.
You know, further to that, I was just reminded by. I forgot the name of the guy that was talking about millennials just before we started. But I was in charge of a piece of global research about 4 years ago where we looked at millennials and the way they thought about life, etc. And we found one interesting thing that relates to this panel, which is that when we asked millennials what do they expect from brands, the number one answer was nothing to do with product delivery, it was nothing to do with safety, it was nothing to do with continuity or honesty. The number one thing they asked from brands was the ability for them to be able to project themselves through the brand, that the brand became a medium for themselves. And I think that's the world we're in today. I mean, the whole adjunct of, you know, selfies and social media, etc., all these things are about the fact that people are very much focused on how I project myself. And in that sense, I'm not surprised with the results we got and the way people reflect upon the way they think we project ourselves. Or where it's a lot of, like, I don't know him, that probably says there's a big gap. Like, you know, a lot of people in North America need to see my underwear presentation.
So if I were somebody who hadn't really thought about this, is really thinking about it for the first time, I might think, geez, you really have to be extroverted and to put yourself out there and build a brand. But we had a little conversation before this where it might surprise you that not everyone up here, even if they have a lot of comments on social media, aren't necessarily extroverted. So Annie, I know you're introverted. I'm introverted. Others, Dave, I would say you're probably an extrovert, right?
Every personality test I've ever done says I'm a massive introvert.
There you go. So you don't.
But I learned very early on. A psychologist once told me many years ago that introverts are the best people at promoting themselves. They just don't like to do it they like to do it through media. They don't like doing it through personal occasions.
Interesting.
Yeah, if you're kind of a relatively shy person, then the web was an enormous boon. Like getting onto communities and such, like there's, you know, suddenly it's like this kind of fantasy of, oh great, I can be judged only by my words and my, you know, it's not, I don't have to kind of like sit around and stumble awkwardly or whatever and such like. And to some extent that, you know, we've moved away from that to now something where the web is much more tied to your real life identity. It's much more tied to who you are. I know, for instance, that it's definitely a very different experience. Certainly if you're like a young woman online, you get enormously judged on photos, on selfies, on kind of like the whole sort of, you know, your whole sort of physicality and actual offline existence gets judged and kind of probed all the time, which is, you know, a move away from that kind of introvert's dream, to say the least.
So we just have a few minutes left, so I want to open up the floor to questions, you know, if people have some. Gentleman in the back with the jacket on.
Hi, it's David here. It's more kind of two comments than a question. I found our company has undergone, our executive team, an endeavor to actually build the personal brands of our executives, and also we work with a lot of clients who invest big money in trying to become more attractive in the speech that I gave before. Deloitte was a particular company who has a case study out there. They promoted the personal brands of 5 of their consultants, and their 5 consultants had more engagement on LinkedIn than the entire Deloitte brand. And Deloitte has over 1 million followers on LinkedIn. So it can be an incredible, powerful way to grow your business. The second thing, I'm by no means Kim Kardashian famous, but the executive marketing team have invested in my profile. And that has resulted in us using 0 recruiters for hiring my teams. And I get 2 business leads a month, which comes into Universum asking me about my opinion on stuff. So I think the important thing to talk about is why we're building our personal brand. It can be an incredible way to find a new job, build a great business, and hire people. So, sorry, that's my comment.
I think sort of further to that actually, like LinkedIn is an interesting case because LinkedIn is so full of kind of corporateness and jargon and people being very cagey that even the slightest bit of humanity, the slightest bit of kind of showing an interest can pay massive dividends there. You can, it's the kind of frontier of personal branding in that there's so little humanity in it that you can really build up quite a lot just by kind of being yourself a bit.
It's very much the reason why corporate blogs failed. If you think back, nobody reads corporate blogs, and there's some attempts now to get some employees to blog for the companies. But after PR and legal has sanitized that stuff, it's not anything anybody wants to read. So if you are have to take some risk to have some actual opinion. So whether it's from more personal, it's my company, so I can't fire myself yet anyway. I can say certain things, and I think so that's one key difference also here.
Can I just make a little point about, before I forget, about all of you attending this session and this conference. A couple of years ago, I did a large piece of work for a very large Seattle-based computer software company where they were asking the question, how long would it be before we got rid of anybody going to conferences and just doing everything doing conferences just online? No more physical attendance. The overwhelming result was that whether we were talking to 20-year-olds or 60-year-olds, was that the value of these things is self-branding. It's the only value in coming here. The only reason you're sitting in this room is you're trying to promote your brand. Because it's much easier, and to this day, despite the power of social media, despite all the things we can do on Twitter or LinkedIn, etc., the reality is that personal human interactions, as in the physical space, is still the most powerful way to create a brand.
Everyone, I don't want to be here. This is not my place of networking. It just doesn't work for me. Social media is pretty much, this is a little extreme, but saved my life. I can't do all this kind of person-to-person interaction, which is why I am so much on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and blogging and all that stuff, because I can speak in the way I wish I could speak to people personally online. And since I do so much of that online, people get to know me that way. My brand has come from social media. That has turned into people saying, oh, come to a conference. And I'm like, well, okay, but I'd much rather be like right here. This is where my brand is, and this is where I feel comfortable with my brand. That's my case.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Happy to do it. That's what I hope is part of my brand. Like, do you want to be friends with your butter? No one wants to be friends with your butter. But if I can go onto Twitter and say I'm a bad ukulele player and I love dessert, you know that whatever I'm going to say is going to actually be me. I may not tell you in person, but it's all here and it's going to be honest and me.
Thank you, panel. So